Hello, everyone. Integrating Real Perspective. John here. And today I am going to be reviewing The Spectacular Now, directed by James Ponsoldt, starring Miles Teller and Shailene Woodley, based on a novel by Tim Tharp. Movie came out in 2013. Now, this movie was something that I was going to review in the early part of January, yeah. Um, but it took me a while to finally come around and watch it again because this film is a really emotional one for me. It's one that I usually make a tradition to watch on Valentine's Day. It's 3 days now after Valentine's Day, so I was a bit late to watch it. But it is still one that I revisit because it's the ultimate comfort film for me as far as Valentine's Day films go. With Lost in Translation, Sofia Coppola's movie, being a close second. It's interesting because I've always said um, that I come back to this movie over and over again because it features the softest, sweetest, and most tender sex scene that I have ever seen in a single movie ever. Actually, I'm going to provide the link for that since it's actually you can find it on YouTube. Shailene Woodley, believe it or not, would even say the same thing. She's actually gone on record as saying that the sex scene in the film is the best thing about this movie. Yeah. Um, to me, it is a very tantric moment. Um, Something that sort of reminds me of this Argentinian movie called Don't Look Down from 2008 that was kind of condensed down into this one special scene involving just these two teenagers that are just coming of age and starting to learn about what adulthood is. Um, and just experiencing like the purest expression of love for each other despite all their dysfunctions, despite how little value they think for of themselves. Um, in particular, Miles Teller's character, Sutter Keeley, yeah? Because he is especially somebody that um, takes for granted what the title of this movie means because he's always a guy that really lives quote unquote in the now. That's how he always quotes himself, whether he's talking up a blue streak with his friends, if you could even call them his friends, or just his um, his little off-screen narrative that he gives when he's filling out this essay for college, which actually bookmarks the beginning and the ending of the movie. Yeah, nearly the end of the movie. Yeah. Now, it is important, of course, to remember that everything else that surrounds this particular scene too. So Sutter, played by Miles Teller, always saw the best in others and always did everything he could to lift their spirits. I mean, Miles Teller is a Pisces after all, so he's definitely the sort of person who thinks about everyone except himself. I mean, and this movie really is an archetype for his astrology sign right here. He doesn't really have a very well developed personality. Despite the fact that he is such a hit with the ladies who always leaned on him he was the go-to guy anytime that they needed booze and a place to go and party. He was the guy. He was the messenger boy. And oh, and how was Sutter a party animal? Basically, drinking his way into a blissful oblivion. And, you know, his booze problem is an amplification, a magnification of just how apathetic he is about life. I mean, life is just one big party to him. He doesn't really have any ambitions, nothing at all. And this definitely shows in his relationship with Cassidy, played by the lovely Brie Larson, um, who, just broke up with Sutter because of the fact that he was so aloof, and not even thinking about college at all. Now, I mean, I'm not saying that college life is for everybody, and I know that this movie is using the basic high school coming of age story as a formula to um, talk about capturing that lightning in a bottle and carrying it with you through a string of epiphanies that you experience in your life that you have to constantly follow. So, I mean, I can understand like the film is about meaning and understanding, you know, what your purpose in life is, and, sticking to your guns no matter who pushes you down. And, seeing as how this movie plays homage to high school teen flicks of the 1980s, I'm almost reminded of The Sure Thing, a John Cusack movie from 1985. I actually talked about that film a little bit in my High Fidelity review, where John Cusack's character, Gibb, is almost like Sutter in some parts, especially the scene from that movie where he teases Daphne Zuniga's character, Allison, for being repressed, while on a road trip, and then leading to her flashing a random truck full of hillbillies in the neighboring lane after one of them moons her. So then, so then there's Amy, Shailene Woodley's character, who comes along right after the opening title credits show up for the film. It happens at a point where she finds him lying on the ground after he, um, after Sutter had crashed his car off the side of the road into some random front yard of an unnamed resident. She's doing her early morning paper route when she discovers Sutter. She's this stranger who otherwise has a very kind and generous heart who, quote unquote, sees Sutter, much like how Leslie saw Jess in Bridge to Terabithia and then took him under his wing. So Amy then starts a friendship with Sutter, who at first helps her out with the paper route, and then it starts to blossom into them becoming homework buddies, which is where Sutter finds out about Amy's love for science fiction. Well, she loves books in general, and her favorite novel is Gleaming Planet. Now, Gleaming Planet is a fictional manga novel made specifically for this movie alone. And it's a pretty fascinating novel, to say the least. I'd like to get into that book in a bit because I feel it's a plot device that is very telling about Amy's character on a deeper level that isn't otherwise explored in the movie, although possibly it is explored deeper in Tim Tharp's novel. I do want to spend some time talking about Shailene Woodley herself, though. This movie was my introduction to her work, and oh my goodness, is she a heart fluttering presence on screen. She plays these really sweet, empathetic characters that require for her to have a big heart, who nurtures those who are hurt and who also live on the fringes of society. Yeah. And also, um, she is one of those actresses who, like Jennifer Love Hewitt, is beautiful when she cries. Like, she is another one of those actresses that is such an expert at really releasing her emotions in a very authentic and very, very passionate way. I mean, that's the why I loved her so much as Kat in White Bird in a Blizzard. Yeah, a movie that I'm also going to be reviewing down the road, which is also going to have a book to movie comparison with. I just recently picked up the book for that movie recently. Um, she can, however, have a very strong and fierce spirit to her, like in Snowden, where she's playing Lindsay, the girlfriend of the titular title character, which was based off of the infamous whistleblower Edward Snowden. Joseph Gordon-Levitt did a fantastic job in that role in that film. And I did finally get around to see Divergent recently. Only the first one. I haven't seen the other two movies from that series. But that movie had a very interesting inversion of power dynamics because Shailene and Miles Teller also star together in that film. But Shailene is taking the lead, and Miles is actually limited to a co-star role, which I thought was really cool to see. Yeah. In that movie, Miles plays Peter, who's basically a real dick until he realizes that he's become a tool for the erudites and has to ally with Beatrice, who is Shailene Woodley's character, to take back their power and destroy the corrupt faction system. So now let's get back to Gleaming Planet here. It turns out that when I looked into this book, the full book itself is only 6 pages long, and it was designed by Michael Manning. He does the writing and the animation for it. However, the book itself is seen only in a few brief glimpses during the scene in Amy's bedroom where Sutter is there to do a geometry study session with her. So it's not really all that clear as to whether the manga book itself um, was in fact a full publication, despite the physical copy in the film appearing to be 200 to 300 pages long. I kid you not when I say this as well, but when I was researching this book online to actually find a copy to purchase, I came up with nothing. Not a single Barnes and Noble or Amazon or abooks.com. Nowhere. You cannot find this book anywhere. However, I did find the book itself on this one website here that um is a website called dreamsequence.org, and that's where I was able to find the original drafts of Gleaming Planet. So what I'm going to present here is the full version of Gleaming Planet, which, from what I'm seeing, is merely just an extract of what could be a part of a larger story. Call it a fractal of a much larger reality that um, is presented in this manga, for which you just have to use your imagination to um, kind of complete the picture of what the what the overarching story is and how it connects with Amy's character, how Amy resonates with this novel, this manga novel. So I'm going to be doing my best to give a synopsis here and see how this may reveal more about Amy, if anything at all. And I'll be showing the original draft pages from dreamsequence.org that were presented in the manga, something that the movie does not show you at all. So the story Gleaming Planet focuses on three major characters: Commander Shiri Magoto, Shandora, who is an empath, and Commander Magoto's arch enemy, General Oriax. They're carrying a cargo of refugees on board, seeking a new home and discovering this rogue planet, which holds the key to their survival. Shandora is picking up information from the planet, which she relays to the commander regarding some energetic vibrations from the gleaming planet and how they seem to suggest that the people on that planet are warm and friendly, that she's quote unquote never experienced such feelings of harmony and equilibrium before, which I'm quoting here ad verbatim. And yet, just as Magoto is about to set a course for the planet, a red alert appears on the radar as a warp drive is detected from an unknown ship. And soon the Magoto's ship, or Commander Magoto's ship, is surrounded by an enemy known as the Dark Galaxy Fleet. So that's when General Oriax makes his grand appearance on the front prompter screen. And what follows is a brief recap of a battle that him and Magoto had before, where Oriax was defeated and his ship was swept into the grip of the Nexus. That sounds like it was taking inspiration from the Star Trek Generations movie from 1994. But now Oriax has come back with a stronger fleet than before and looks forward to a second battle with Magoto. And then Magoto gives a speech about how she's promised to lead her people out of darkness and towards a life free from fear. And that's Oriax's return. That Oriax's return would not stop her from reaching the gleaming planet. So this is the point in which the book cuts off. It sounds to me like the title of this manga is loosely inspired by the movie Fantastic Planet. This is my interpretation of it, simply because the title sounds similar. Gleaming Planet, Fantastic Planet. Fantastic Planet is an animated film from 1973 by director Rene Lalau, and a film that I hold in the highest regard since it's a film that shaped my childhood, especially when Criterion put out a newly restored version of it in 2016. Obviously, the manga cuts off after Magoto's retort to Oriax, but I can also see similar themes between the empath Shandora and the Alms in Fantastic Planet acquiring powers of meditation as a result of stealing the headband from the Drogs. That headband that gives the Alms a mental narrative of the the Fantastic Planet and the conflicts between the alms and the drogs, um, and the acquiring of knowledge to reach a state of ecstasy, which of course results in, if you've seen Fantastic Planet, there's those repeated sequences of the drogs entering into these bubbles and floating above the skyline of the planet. I can't remember the name of the planet. It's not the Fantastic Planet, but the planet where the Drogs enslave the Ohms. Um, anyways, definitely see that movie sometime. Highly recommended. I can only speculate that Shendora escaped from a similar race, ruled over by Oriax, and that her and Magoto met while being stranded on some prison planet. Now, honestly, I don't really know. Well, I don't know what the premise is to this manga. What I can say is that Gleaming Planet is very telling of Amy's character. She's idealistic. I perceive her as having a rich imagination because she only sees the good, the true, and the beautiful in people because of how loving, caring, and compassionate she is, especially because when we're introduced to her in the beginning, she's taking care of her mom, who lives alone and helps her out with the paper route. And even though she doesn't seem like Sutter's type, since both best friends of the two leads would point out, like Caitlin Devers' character who plays the best friend of Amy, there is something about the two being unlike each other that brings them together. And it's a lot like that Evan Rachel Wood movie that came out the same year as The Spectacular Now, the movie Barefoot. Right, okay, so yeah, let's get back on track now with Amy and Sutter. So Amy appears in Sutter's life as this unexpected angel, but he doesn't realize it yet. In fact, he doesn't even realize how very special this girl will be to him. The way things start out is that they start doing little things together, like him helping her with the paper route, and then later on becoming study buddies for school, study friends. Then Sutter invites Amy to an outdoor party where, much to my indulgence, is the unexpected presence of New Theory by Washed Out from his Life of Leisure EP playing in the background. Just a little trivia check there for all those people who love the soundtrack aspect to movies. And that's where Sutter starts playing both the mentor and the romantic. First, he helps encourage Amy to stand up to her mom by telling her that she's going to attend a college, which she got accepted at in Philadelphia, that she doesn't want to stay home for the rest of her life and, take care of her mom and do the paper route. It's not really clear what degree she's pursuing. The main thing is that it's appealing to Sutter in that she's getting out of Athens, Georgia. The novel is actually set in Oklahoma and going out to live her own life. Then Sutter asks her out to prom. This gets both friends of each character feeling suspicious. Sutter's friend finds it weird that he would be going for the most unpopular wallflower girl in school and honestly questions whether Sutter is serious about making her his first real girlfriend or whether he's just going to get her drunk and then ghost her when he gets bored of her. Meanwhile, Amy's friend Crystal, played by Caitlin Dever from Olivia Wilde's own coming of age high school comedy film Booksmart from 2019, is even more confused to the point of being protective of Amy. He even talks down to Sutter and tells him that Amy is a precious jewel that he should not be taken advantage of, that he should just leave her alone because he's not going to break her heart. Boy, I had absolutely no idea that Amy's best friend in that film was played by a 17-year-old Caitlin Dever. Yeah, Caitlin Dever would have a major starring role in Booksmart as Amy, a movie that I only started getting around to seeing in 2020. boy, was she a thrill to watch. Not a moment went by where she wasn't doing something that was hilarious or original. And Olivia Wilde really struck gold with her directorial debut. Me actually being a fan of Olivia Wilde for quite a while, going back to her days, oddly enough, when she had a small part in The Girl Next Door from 2004. Olivia Wilde making a high school film that was colorful, fun, and raunchy, but still being intelligent, a movie of good taste. And her chemistry, Caitlin Dever's chemistry with Beanie Feldstein was just as fun to watch as it was sampling many different types of candy. The duel gave different flavors of comedy every second of the way, especially the drug trip scene where the girls turn into Barbie dolls. Oh my gosh, that is still the most memorable highlight from that film. OMG. However, now in the spectacular now, Caitlin is just a supporting role who isn't given a lot of screen time. But in the first third of the film, she is a very important component to the story. Yeah. Honestly, I just wish there would have been more scenes between her and Amy so that I could hear their side of the conversation behind the scenes when Sutter wasn't around. But oh well. Anyways, from here onward, the film goes back and forth between Sutter's blossoming relationship with Amy and then reoccurring visits with his ex-girlfriend Cassidy. Yeah. Cassidy, by the way, shows up at the party that Sutter invites Amy to, which interestingly enough was a party that I believe she invited Sutter out to, or Sutter was asking her if she was going to be at the party. It's weird because Cassidy still seems to have feelings for Sutter, but they're rather wishy-washy. Yeah. It's like she still has positive memories of him, except that whenever they meet up and hang out, she's frustrated to see him still being the same boring yet attention-getting kid living in a teenager's body. Actually, he happens to be a young adult in the film, as revealed towards the end. Apparently, he's, gosh, I think like in his early 20s, but he's still in high school. So I just thought about this now because I believe he's actually been held back quite a few grades, never really properly graduating. Um, and that just goes to show that Sutter is someone who doesn't want to look towards any higher goal or aspiration in life. He sees no future. He always says that we need to live in the now. Life is all about being here and now. Well, he just sees no future, so therefore he doesn't see a peak that he wants to climb to where he can feel happy about some personal achievement. And this just makes Cassidy feel like she's lost hope. Like, even telling Sutter to leave at one point after they get together and they get drunk. I mean, she wants to have something to look forward to in life where she can really be happy, where she can, you know, create her own individual identity. Yeah. She feels like life shouldn't be just about, you know, making it one big vacation, making it just one ongoing vacation, where it's like you get drunk, you get stoned, you just live life, drop out, live free, whatever I guess the old hippie maxim is. Um, and yet that's where I have to bring up the other side of the picture. Cassidy's new boyfriend, Marcus, is actually quite jealous of Sutter because of how charismatic and fun seeking he is. And he actually wants to know how he can emulate Sutter's style so as to be a better partner for Cassidy. Yeah. Now, in my opinion, and this I realize this is going to be a controversial opinion, but I pride myself for being honest and individual in my opinions. These are the things that make the spectacular now set the bar higher for 1980s style high school flicks. And obviously, why A24 Studios picked up on this film in 2013. There's something more grounded and authentic with these characters, which sets it apart from The Breakfast Club as a most typical example. Because The Breakfast Club had a much more clean cut and easily palatable flavor of storytelling, even if the 80s was a time where, you know, the youth of the day was getting more in touch with their emotions and really letting out more of their darker, more thonic, underground side of themselves and the angst that they were experiencing in their own homes with their own families and even amongst the education system, just trying to find, you know, soul and life in everything that they do before entering into adulthood, before entering into that initiation phase of, the larger social sphere of the world, the outside world. Yet, I find it interesting that there are still people out there who love the Breakfast Club, and there's still a lot of talk about the Breakfast Club, but they've never watched the Spectacular Now. And it's like, my gosh, get with the times, man. This, the Breakfast Club is a dinosaur film. The Spectacular Now updates things in a huge way. Okay, so they both capture the same feeling, but both stories are obviously told for the decades in which they were set in. The Breakfast Club depicted high school youth in the 80s. The Spectacular Now is what high school life was like in the 2010s. Um, and it's certainly about getting under the surface of the characters more to see how the conditions of their lives shape the trials and tribulations that they face today. I mean, I guess there's a bit of a Mandela effect between those two particular films. And I mean, just like 80s John Hughes films and any film that depicted the high school youth of that decade. In that, I mean, things have, I mean, the more that things change, the more that things stay the same. That's kind of, what plays into this is that there are still things that have remained the same since the 80s. We've just gotten a lot more of a deeper insight into the psyche of the high school mind than we ever did back in the 80s. That's certainly the case when we learn more about Sutter's father as the movie unfolds, or even what happened with Amy's father, because both leads have experienced the loss of connection with their own fathers. Difference that with Amy, her dad died of an opiate overdose. The story of Sutter's father is much more mysterious than that, as he doesn't really know where he is, but he's compensated for that by making up this lie that his dad is a pilot and that he just died on a plane crash. I mean, that's at least the story that his mom had been perpetuating. But of course, as we start to learn more, there's more of an insidious factor to the disappearance of Sutter's dad. Let's actually jump right into that part of the story since it's really what's most pertinent to this review. Amy finally gets Sutter to confront his dad, but it doesn't happen right away. First, Sutter tries getting his dad's phone number from his mom. Oh, yeah. By the way, his mom, Sarah, is played by the ever so wonderful Jennifer Jason Leigh. That was a great casting choice. I've loved just about everything that that woman has been in since, gosh, since I was a little kid. I mean, I can still remember the earliest memory of her being in Backdraft, a 1991 movie. But anyways, she refuses, Sutter's mom refuses, simply telling him, "You live under my roof, therefore it's my rules that you follow," and then leaves it at that. Sutter even retorts back by saying, "No wonder he left you." Next, Sutter uh, goes to his sister, played by Mary Elizabeth Winstead, and Sutter's sister, Holly. Um, she's a rather interesting one. She is the exact opposite of Sutter in that she lives a life of leisure. Haha, another washed out reference. She got married to an attorney and has never had to work another day in her life. She lives in this big house with a beautiful garden and has everything to make her happy. Yeah? And she obviously does not have an alcohol problem. When Sutter asks her about about his dad, about their dad, and vents about his mom being guarded when asking about him, he tries coaxing Holly to get his phone number from her. But then Holly confesses that their mom doesn't have it, but that she does. And it's clear from the tears streaming down her face as she gives him his number that she knows he's not going to like what he finds. She even leaves Sutter with an invitation to have him come over for lunch sometime soon as a way of um, implicitly telling him how sorry she feels for him. Just as um, kind of like a fair warning that things are going to be rather triggering for him. So Sutter and Amy travel to visit Tommy. That's Sutter's dad's name, played by Kyle Chandler. Oh boy, Kyle Chandler. Does he ever fit this role so perfectly because of how it's a nice 180-degree flip from his role in 2011's Super 8? Now, in both that movie and in 2019's Godzilla King of the Monsters, which I actually reviewed on my Facebook page if you want to check that out, he's usually playing the grieving parent or the spouse. But here, however, he gets to play a bumbling drunk who starts off on the wrong foot with Sutter and Amy once they show up at his apartment doorstep. He wants to invite the two to attend a ball game and then forgets about it and instead just takes him out to the bar to get a pitcher of beer. Obviously his favorite place in the world to visit, since that's all he wants to do is drink. Now Sutter can see what a mirror reflection he is of his own drinking problems. And that's just the beginning. Then we get into the conversation at the bar. That's when Sutter finds out why Tommy left Sarah, his mom. It turns out that Tommy wasn't kicked out by Sarah. He just up and left once it became clear that she was just an overnight fling. and that he wasn't expecting to get her pregnant and have to grow up and be a dad. So basically, Tommy has been an irresponsible teenager living inside a man's body. And I mean, even some 17, 18 years later, well, actually, it turns out that Sutter is a lot older than that. He's in his early 20s. Um, and I guess has had to repeat the 12th grade a few times. I mean, despite all that, like, Tommy is just a lowlife. Sutter, on the other hand, still wants to bond with his dad despite his shortcomings. And yet Tommy keeps shooting himself in the foot at every attempt to let his son in. He makes Sutter and Amy pay the tab. He ghosts him and Amy after they wait at his apartment to come back from the bar, only to still see him at the bar hanging out with his drinking buddies. Convinced that he's just a loser who could never show affection and love for his son, Sutter and Amy leave. Now, who is Tommy anyway? Just looking back on all this. Because even he doesn't know himself. He doesn't have a job, it seems. He has no self worth, no values. He can swoon a woman easy and have quote unquote fun, or as he likes to call it, living in the now, which circles back to what Sutter was saying early on with Cassidy, and the arrogant stubbornness of living in the moment, which obscures the relationship with the bigger picture, with the whole, obsessing over the part while ignoring the whole. Basically, Tommy is just a freeloader who only lives for pleasure, but never really welcomes any change. He's very obstinate and complacent. And all for what? For nothing more than just a drunken walk. A drunken walk towards oblivion. Sure, the movie doesn't really dwell on the details of where Tommy's path eventually leads him, but it's glaringly obvious to the point where really it's now left to your imagination. Your imagination is really only the limit as to where this life of complacency and escaping from life's responsibilities leaves Tommy. From here, unfortunately, the shadows start to come out with Sutter, and Amy is exposed to them. Their relationship starts to turn ugly on the way home when Sutter rejects Amy's efforts to comfort him. He tells her that he's not right for him, and even goes so far as to call her out on being shallow for falling in love with him. He says that, she was lucky that some guy even took interest in her in the first place. This cuts so deep for Amy that she almost ends up getting killed by a runaway truck who, and then ends up getting her arm broken in the process. This actually follows after Sutter nearly collides with a car on the road, he himself being drunk, after which he veers off to the side of the road, where he then forces Amy out, which leads to the nearby truck hitting her. Then, of course, he comes to his senses and comes to her aid. Whew. Boy, what a mess this relationship turns into. Following this incident, Sutter attends to Amy at the hospital where her mom is by her bedside. So this is really the only time we see her mom, and she's barely a distant figure framed by the window in the doorway where Sutter is peering in. We don't even see her face. Then Sarah, Sutter's mom, comes along, though, to drive Sutter home, though curiously, she still doesn't know that him and Amy had just returned home from her ex-husband's. Amy, of course, still forgives Sutter despite his destructive outburst causing her arm to get broken. It's actually quite interesting to see Sutter unraveled and emotionally undone at this point. I mean, he basically hates himself, but that's because he can no longer hide from his true self and distance himself by becoming a flaky, pleasure seeking guy anymore. This is the point of no return for him. Huh? Now everything and everyone he's ever been close to are put into question. And now he can no longer put on the little chap clown act anymore. Like, stop the world, I want to get off. Because he has to face up to the hard truths that life has brought to him. His boss offers him a promotion to assistant manager at his job, and Sutter turns it down because he can't give up his drinking habit like his boss demands that he does in order to earn that promotion. He tells his math teacher that he cannot pass the final, even with repeated conversations with his teacher keeping him after class to talk about how important it is for him to pass this final so that he can graduate. And Sutter just doesn't care. Even towards like the last third of the movie, Cassidy won't even let him come and visit her and Marcus when they move to California, even though her parting words are, "You'll always be my best ex-boyfriend." And he even ends up leaving Amy at the bus station as she travels to Philadelphia alone. Ah, ha, ha. Yes. Yeah, I guess I should get into that story thread as well, because like that scene where Sutter is driving past the bus station and he's just peering out the window with that very pathetic, self-loathing, woe is me look on his face, while poor Amy is just, constantly, trying to call Sutter. Um, he's not picking up. She's just looking really worried and confused and ultimately heartbroken. And Sutter just doesn't give a crap. He just doesn't give a crap. I mean, he ends up going to a bar afterwards. Oh, yeah, what a walking cliche he's become at this point. So, obviously, I'm going to have to get into the story thread that leads up to this point, as I think it does serve as a good comparison shot to show how Sutter's lackadaisical behavior would give way to his hidden pent up rage and self hatred later on. So, you remember the prom scene I had told you about earlier? Well, I am going to give an analysis on that whole segment. Amy and Sutter are walking alone down this one hallway at the school, at their high school, taking a break from all the crowd activity of the prom dance that's going on earlier. Um, and Amy announces some good news to Sutter that in addition to getting accepted at Philly, and this is where I'm following up here from like way earlier in the film when they were at that outdoor party and Sutter was, you know, puffing up his ego and showing his bravado as like this pop counselor trying, to empower Amy with the ability to step up to her mom. So, she follows up now with what Sutter's had been trying to give good advice to her about, by saying that now Amy's sister found her a job at the campus bookstore, and she brings up this bright and beautiful idea that would bring her and Sutter together. They would both get jobs and live in one of the vacant apartment dorms off campus. So there's apparently this rare opportunity that occurred as a result of the economy being so bad at that moment in time. So there's a lot of vacancies on campus. And I'm guessing that means that rent is cheap, so it means that they'd be able to live together and support each other's dreams. And yeah, she even talks so dreamily about the Liberty Bell and how she's never seen it before. Like she's just ecstatic. She's just, you know, dancing under the moonlight on this crystal staircase, and you can see just the wonder and the romance in her eyes and how, she's trying to share this wonderful thing, this wonderful epiphany with Sutter. Now you think at this point that this would be a scene where Sutter's eyes are wide open with wonder and excitement. I mean, you consider a few minutes earlier when they were on the dance floor, Sutter had just finished dancing with Cassidy. He sits back down with Amy, talks about how this is, you know, one night where everybody can still feel young again. He's yelling out, "I love you all. You're all so beautiful." Okay, so okay, I couldn't help but chuckle a little bit at how innocent and naive and how fake Sutter is. I mean, look, for any of those who have seen Can't Hardly Wait, which was a high school party teen movie from the late 90s, there's these two leads in the film. So there's Preston and Amanda. And in that movie, there's this there are these two restless romantics who, like the male character is very, very doubtful, in this case, Preston, about whether this is going to be his chance now, that this is his destiny, that he's now found out that Mike Dexter had just dumped Amanda, the high school prom queen that has just this enviable beauty to her. But it's like because Preston remains pure at heart, despite being at this gargantuous party that everybody's going to, um, he ends up eventually getting the girl that he wants. And they have this very beautiful blossoming romance post high school. Unfortunately, that is not what's happening here in the Spectacular Now. You know, it, it, it even tries like to throw in a song that I really love by Ariel Pink's Haunted Graffiti. The song Baby comes on during the slow dance scene between Sutter and Amy. And you'd think that this would be like Preston and Amanda. No, by the way, that song Baby is from the album Mature Themes, from Ariel Pink's Haunted Graffiti. So, you know, you would think that this would turn into a point of just this golden bond, you know, just bringing these two together and closing the gap and officially making them an item, a couple that can have a happy ever after. But that's when all that light in Sutter's eyes fades into apathy, when Amy offers this gift for the two to be roommates in Philly. It's like once his girlfriend starts to give him something that is a sacred vow of love forever and ever, Sutter's mind just starts to do a disappearing act. So, like, okay, when Amy asks, what do you think? After everything she just talked about, rent being affordable for the two of them to live on campus and the two of them getting jobs on campus and everything, and talking about the wonderful, beautiful things that Philly has to offer, the wonderful sights and scenes. Um, you know, what does Sutter do? What is his response? but just a flaky, yeah, I think it's great. Pathetic. What a drunk flake. I mean, you can't even begin. I mean, you can even begin to see Amy's eyebrows start to drop. She's asking him, "Really? Are you sure?" As she starts suspecting that he's really not all that there mentally, and emotionally. I find myself both frustrated and sorry for Sutter, given that the fact he doesn't know how to receive love from another is in fact just a reflection of how little he loves himself. When you get underneath all the fluffy swagger he just flaunts about, um, and you realize this whole time that he's always just been hiding away from the things that he doesn't like about himself. His defense mechanism is that he will always see the good things about others and try to make them feel loved and like they have a place to belong. But he's also doing that while not acknowledging that he's been becoming more and more abandoned and more barren inside himself. You know, distancing himself from himself, only to make this blank, faceless being. There's actually a similar male character that's the character Will in the movie Band Slam, where he goes through a similar ordeal as well. Definitely check that movie out if you like this review and if you watched The Spectacular Now already. Check out Band Slam. I think you'd love that movie. Heck, I would even say that Will's character has a much happier ending than Sutter. But I'm not gonna give spoilers away. Moving forward. Okay, so then a breakthrough occurs. And this is after Sutter just passes Amy by and leaves her at the bus station, just confused, frustrated, and heartbroken by Sutter's ghosting her. A breakthrough, though, occurs between Sutter and his mom. Now, it's after he comes home from getting drunk again. So, I was talking about how he's at the bar with a bunch of older guys. Typical. Now, I had briefly pointed out earlier when he's at the bar, one of the guys asks how old he is, and he guesses 22 or 23. Now, that could be a double meaning to indicate that either the older guy was too drunk to realize that he's underage with a fake ID, or that Sutter is in fact 22, 23 years old, and that he had to repeat senior year of high school multiple times due to his drinking habit. His mom obviously had a lot of tolerance for him because to be in his early 20s and still stuck in high school, that's pretty sad. And he's still at that age where he he's having fake IDs forged to go to the bars. But finally, he comes crashing into the mailbox on his mom's lawn. Now, this is when Sarah comes outside all frustrated and saying that they've been over this again and again already. Yeah. And then Sutter does something that we haven't seen happen up to this point. He lashes out at his mom, saying that she can't, projecting that she obviously can't stand the sight of Sutter because he looks so much like his dad. He's making accusations that his mom can barely tolerate him because he looks so much like his dad. Well, of course, I've felt that before in my personal life too. And then Sutter breaks down and starts crying when he goes into the house, only to have his mom hugging him, comforting him, assuring him that he's nothing like his dad, while reminiscing over some highlights of Sutter's life as he was growing up. Like helping some old lady with a walker um to get her groceries into the car, um or helping out with like his Sunday school class. Yeah, apparently he was a churchgoer growing up too. So just it's like even this part is kind of sad because his mom is now spoiling him, giving him a pat on the back, despite the fact that he has been very self-destructive and has created this vortex of destruction that has wrecked everyone around him, destroyed any possible dreams or future ambitions that he had at becoming something more than just the sum total of his karma. you know she's trying to make him believe that, because he has such a big heart and cares so much for others, that it's okay that he doesn't have a strong sense of self. That's what I seem to get out of this scene. But I guess that's what he needed to hear so as to not hate himself, I guess. And that's when we reach the end of the film. The final few minutes of the film are where things get very cryptic, though. Now, on the surface, the tone seems very joyful, sunny, and triumphant. It's like sun seems to be breaking through the clouds finally. There's pretty blue skies. But remove the rose-colored glasses, and there's actually more going on than you think. We come back full circle to where Sutter was at the beginning when he was writing his college essay. Sutter claims that life is about recognizing that when you live in the now, that tomorrow there is going to be another now and another and so on. That life is about appreciating the nows as they come along and to follow the string of nows as they come to you. Okay, this was actually a very poorly written part here. Like, it's as if Sutter is trying to present himself as being some wise and pop psychologist, talking about peak experiences and maybe having some sort of tantric message underlying it all about like just accepting, different emotional states as they come along, like clouds moving across the sky. Um, you know, so it just seems like a very false awakening for him, but nonetheless, it makes him happy. But then there are the very, very last few scenes of the movie. Now, this is where I draw a question mark. So we see Sutter driving on a country lane road, clearly towards Amy's college in Philly. When he arrives walking up the concrete stairs of the university, there's Amy walking out the door, and both her and Sutter's eyes meet. He stops, you know, he stops to look up at her, as, he's halfway up the stairs. She's just come out and a smile is starting to, I mean, she's come out of the doorway of the university building, and a smile seems to form, but it doesn't really quite come to completion. There's obviously some clear ambivalence in her facial complexion. As if like she doesn't know whether to feel joy, she doesn't know whether she wants to tell him to fuck off. They both have no words to say at all. Screen goes black. The end. Now, what is there to make of that ending? you may ask? Reddit actually has had some very interesting interpretations about this movie's ending. What Amy is actually thinking when she sees Sutter, and it's obviously anything but Sutter, you're here. I'm so happy. Now we can live happily ever together forever. But just a reminder, this movie is not Twilight. This is an A24 movie. It's not going to be a happy ending in the conventional Hollywood sense. It is going to have a cryptic ending that will throw off any assuring explanations. So one person on Reddit had an interesting interpretation, and I'm going to translate it in my own words. Normally, Amy would have followed her feelings, hugging and kissing Sutter passionately without giving it a second thought. But now that she's grown up, she's learned to think for herself. I mean, she's likely not going to tell Sutter to fuck off, but she is going to keep her boundaries up around him. No, she's not going to be gullible and say that all is forgiven because she's done this way too many times. And Sutter has only been a self loathing wimp who wallows in his own misery and cries in his beer glass. Obviously, not grateful for the fact that this beautiful woman has shown nothing but endless compassion and love. But there is an unspoken message about this. There is an unspoken message about Amy's side of this too, and that she is equally at fault, even though she's not somebody who has brought a lot of hurt onto others and onto herself. Well, I mean, unless you count the scene where that truck runs her over and her arm gets broken, after Sutter pushes her out. But I mean, she's somebody who believes in a Disneyland type fantasy because remember that there's no father in the picture here. Her father died, and so she just believes that now, she can heal a man as broken as Sutter and that they can just have a happy relationship. But the more that she puts her faith in such a fantasy like that, the more that she invites um, unseen disaster, unseen destruction in her life. And look, now I'm sorry to say this about Sutter, but he could have made smarter choices. That's what makes this film provide a contrast to that tender and loving sex scene that I had talked about at the beginning of my review. Now, he could have made the smart decision to do three things right: finish his education, take that promotion at his job and give up drinking, and take the bus to Philly with Amy. Instead, he's now going to have to live with the consequences based on whatever decision Amy makes, based on his sudden arrival at her college. He clearly wants to change now and leave his alcoholism addiction behind. But now Amy developed her intellect to the point where now she can see more choice in expressing different emotional responses rather than simply reacting to a person that stimulates a set familiar pattern. For instance, she can choose not to forgive Sutter, but to be pissed off with him. She's given herself permission to let her thoughts interpret symbolically what her emotions would otherwise dictate. And whatever it was with Sutter who encouraged her to reach for bigger and better things, remember it was Sutter who encouraged her to reach for bigger and better things beyond just living with her mom and taking care of the paper route. She's taken his advice and is now running with it. But as a consequence, he now has to reach for higher goals and ambitions. It has to be um, an equal win-win value. Especially to, help Sutter realize that he too is more than just the poor boy that was abandoned by his dad before he was in kindergarten. I mean, it could mean pursuing a degree in a counsel as to be a counselor for recovering addicts, though I hope that Sutter aims even higher than that. My takeaway from this analysis is that Sutter is learning to value what he has presented to him in the moment and not push it away. But he had to learn that by confronting his own inner demons. And by, quote, demons, unquote, I mean those difficult emotions he found hard to express, that he numbed through alcohol. As a consequence, he'd only find self worth through helping others, which could be a gift in itself, but ideally it would be one that would have rewards attached to it. He would hopefully attract true love, whether that's with Amy or with someone else. It would be a woman that could take care of him, so that now he could finally get the domestic nest and comfort and security that he never had. I guess that sums up how the movie ends. It's neither optimistic nor pessimistic. It just is, quote unquote, is. It's the isness of it that you're left with. So yeah, that's my review of The Spectacular Now. And um yeah, um it's definitely a movie that I would recommend. Um Certainly if you love, the 1980s John Hughes type movies, but with more of like a real world flavor injected into it, one that actually leaves the situations with high school angst and how the teenagers that are coming of age deal with it ambiguous. Something where you have to draw your own conclusions to it. But yeah, I will definitely see you on the flip side of the reel then. All right. Cheerio.